Welcome to Roundabout Creative Chaos, a podcast about people who make things and the stories behind why they do it. I'm Tammy Coron, and I'm joined by my well-read co-host Tim Mitra for episode 148, which was recorded on June 9th, 2026. On this episode, we talk with David Arndt. David teaches literature and philosophy at St. Mary's College of California. His book, Philosophy of Writing, took 25 years to write and is out now from Bloomsbury. It argues that writing isn't just a way to communicate ideas you've already had, it's a way to develop them. And you can read it for free on the Bloomsbury website as an open access title. The three of us talk about why writing is a practice of self-transformation, what wisdom means, and why lighting a fire is not the same thing as filling a bucket. Are you ready to talk tech, music, arts, and zombies? I know we are, so grab your crossbow and let's get this episode started.
Are you recording this? You are.
Yeah, I am.
You're an
Why,
evil
did you want to
woman.
say something bad to me?
No.
Lies.
David Arndt, right?
Yeah, I gotta ask him how he pronounces his name. Let me let him in.
All right.
Hey, David. We're arguing over the pronunciation of your last name.
Well, that, and we're talking about how bad AI is in our job.
Oh,
and
yeah,
stuff,
there's
but-
that. Oh, gosh.
My last name is pronounced Arndt, as in, aren't we having fun?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I don't think Tim is having fun. He's fighting with his computer over there.
Well, no, it's a busy week for us because this is the developer week at Apple, right? So this is like our Christmas, and it's like we have all these toys to unwrap, and we're not allowed to unwrap them until whatever. So there's like 100 video sessions we have to consume, and
Tim, I don't think I miss those days.
No,
I was thinking about it today. I'm like, I remember the times when I'd be so excited for WWDC, and
Yeah.
now it's just like, okay, just another keynote.
Well, the last time I was there in person, I thought to myself, I'm not doing this again.
Yeah.
And yet I
Yeah.
put my name into the lottery every year. I went like a fool.
It was something that for a while, like every time there was a WWDC, it seemed like there was some sort of new and amazing product.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't even imagine that they had done that.
I'm trying to turn up David. He's a little low.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're okay.
It should be fine on his side. You have
It's
control
fine
over
on
that?
his. I thought I did. New software. I'm still trying to get used to it.
That's your
It's
story.
good enough. I'll just lean in and listen more. The problem is, Tim, you're just so darn loud.
Am I? This mic is like quiet.
His mic?
Mine.
Yours? Yeah, David, I don't know what he does with his sound and his microphone. He always sounds amazing on the recordings. I always have to add compression to myself and I have to do a lot of post-production magic to make myself, and then I get to do all the editing and cut off all the stupid things I say. So I make myself sound smart, and I only let Tim sound smart when I want to.
What kind of stuff are you using? Logic Pro X, or what are you using?
For the session recordings, we're using Riverside, but I use DaVinci Resolve for all of the post-production stuff, which
dear.
I love. And Tim and I had taken a long hiatus from this show, and we just got back not too long ago. And back in the day, we were using a completely different setup. So this one, I give it about a 90, a score of a 90, I think.
Out of what,
maybe.
2000?
Out of 2000. Well, David, welcome to the show. This is is it. This is
how we roll. We started about 5 minutes ago.
We did start about 5 minutes ago, but that's all right. But before we get started, I wanted to share with our listeners a couple of reviews of David's new book, Philosophy of Writing. And I'm going to read them as they're written. And I've been having trouble with my eyes today, so I hope I can read this well. But one reviewer wrote, "Reading this book is like finding an oasis in the desert, nourishing, joyful, and refreshing." And another reviewer wrote, "This book will teach you how to write and show you why writing matters. Both very clear and very sophisticated. It's a short, deep, beautiful book." Now, I haven't read all of the book. I looked through some of it, and I'm a writer, and I was very interested in what you had to say. I was very interested in how you're bringing philosophy and literature into everything. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. I want you to let us know who you are and what you do and how it is you came to be writing that book that I read took you about 25 years to do, I think is what I read.
Quite a long time. We'll put it that way.
Wow.
Yeah. My name is David Arndt. I teach literature and philosophy at St. Mary's College of California in a liberal arts program, a great books program called the Integral Program of Liberal Arts. So that's what I do.
How long have you been doing that? Like what led you to teaching?
About 13 years. I got my PhD, and I taught for 6 years at a tiny college in California called Deep Springs College. And then I taught for 5 years at a university in Ankara, Turkey. That was fantastic. And I taught for 2.5 years in a state university in Pennsylvania. And I've been at St. Mary's College for 13 years. I really love it there.
Has it always been philosophy?
Yeah, it goes back to, can I ask you a question? Are you guys in Hopkinsville, Kentucky now?
No, I'm in East Tennessee, and Tim's over on the other side of the lane there in Canada.
Okay.
I'm in the 51st state.
You're the 51st state.
Okay. I think it's just ironic that I ended up being a professor because when I was in high school, I just hated school with every fiber of my being. I just thought it was the most boring, colossal waste of time in the whole world. I think I was the angriest high school student in America, and I did not do well in high school. So I was so bored at a certain point. I felt like I was learning stuff, but I wasn't learning anything worth knowing or worth understanding. So, fortunately, my mother had majored in philosophy when she was in college. So there were books of philosophy just on the bookshelves in our home. And I started to pick those up and read them. And they just really spoke to me. I felt like I was reading about something that really applied directly to my life and that really mattered. Can I read you a passage that made a big difference to me when I read it?
Absolutely.
This is from Epictetus, who was a Roman philosopher. He was born into slavery and taken to Rome in chains, and eventually managed to free himself and become a philosopher. And he wrote a very short book called The Handbook. It's just like a handbook on how to live. And at one point he writes, "What kind of teacher are you waiting for that you procrastinate working on yourself until he arrives? You're not a child anymore. You're already a full-grown man. If you stay careless and lazy, always making excuses, postponing one day after another when you'll start to care for yourself, you won't see that you're failing to make progress, and you'll go through life being an idiot till the day you die."
And what year was that from? That was like from...
That was from maybe 50 BC, I think.
Right.
So 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was like, despite the 20 centuries, it was like he was just talking directly to me, like about my situation right there.
Yeah.
And he had a very simple point, which is I just need to take responsibility for my education. I can't just sit in the back of class with my arms folded and marinate in rage. I need to do something to take responsibility for my education. So I just started reading books of literature and philosophy on my own, and that was what set me on the path to where I am now.
So what kind of age were you at that point in time? Like,
I think I was 16 or 17 at that.
Oh, so you were like still in high school, kind of
I
at
was
that
still
age.
in high school, yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar issue. I mean, I thought I could read, but I discovered I didn't discover reading until I read Kurt Vonnegut, Breakfast of Champions, right? Because it's not written with any kind of, he speaks very plainly. And then I was in university at the time, and I was interested in philosophy because obviously I was raised Roman Catholic, so that has its whole thing. And I went to some Anglican schools, and that has a whole nother thing, right? And then I discovered Zen and Buddhism and stuff like that. And so I was kind of on a journey to, like you, I think, probably to find out what this is all about, really, right? Yeah, it's an interesting little bit of information that you've just shared from somebody from, in the before time, as we like to say, right?
I've always been interested in philosophy. It's probably one of my favorite subjects, to be honest with you. Now, when I found out we had an opportunity to have you on the show, and then I did a little more digging into who you are and what you do, I was very excited because we normally talk about the person and the work that they do, and I'm going to try and not get into the philosophical stuff, but I really want to.
We'll try to bring it together because thinking always comes out of people's actual experience, and so I feel like it's like you can't understand the book unless you understand, in depth, unless it helps to understand where I'm coming from. Yeah. So I'll just say, so I just really I was just a terrible student in high school because I was all I did was skateboarding and reading. And I didn't do any homework. And I also worked delivering papers too, waking up at 3:45 every morning. So I was not my best when I got to high school, but I felt like reading these. I read Epictetus, I read Kant, and I read Nietzsche, and they
Mm,
really spoke to me. And these were like shafts of light coming down into a cave. It helped me. It's like reading them. The world emerged into greater clarity. Plus, I could see there's a lighted space up there, right? There's greater clarity if I can just move towards it. So it was. Like nothing else seemed more important than reading and trying to understand these texts. So people think there's nothing, you know, philosophy and skateboarding, these have nothing in common, but I actually think they both train you to care deeply about something that nobody else cares about.
right. Yeah.
To work really hard on something that you experience as intrinsically worthwhile, but that when I was a skateboarder, skateboarding was just slightly more respectable than vandalism at that
Right. Yeah. You were breaking into people's pools and stuff like that, right?
You have no proof. There's no way.
So, what is it about those philosophers that drew you into each one of them?
I just felt that it was like with the passage I read from Epictetus. I felt like listening to them. They had insights that helped me just see the world around me more clearly. I was at that time very much dividing the whole world into things that were awesome and great and things that were completely lame and stupid, right? And that was the way I saw the world. And Nietzsche has a little section in Beyond Good and Evil, section 32, where he says this is just intellectually immature, right? You're never going to see the world. It's because you have very strong loves and hatreds that you divide the world up into black and white like this, and you're never going to
Hmm.
see reality clearly if you can't master or discipline your passions in this way. That it was just like he was talking directly. He was like it was like he understood me better than I understood myself, right? It was like it's not that I was understanding the book. The book was understanding me, and the book was giving me a language in which I could that revealed more clearly the world in which I was actually living.
And from there, you decided that you wanted to get into teaching, or was there a road or a path that you took that wasn't so direct?
Yeah, it was very indirect. We'll put it that way. So I was because I was an angry and disaffected high school student. I think I ended up with I graduated in the bottom half of my high school class. I had I think a 3.1 GPA. But nevertheless, I was delusionally self confident. I remember going into a guidance counselor's office, and she asked me, "So where do you plan to apply for college?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to apply to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Brown." And they're like, "And what is your GPA?" And I was like, "It's 3.1." And she was like, "No, no, 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 no. Apply to the local community college, and maybe after 2 years you can transfer to a skate school." And I was so deluded, I walked out of the office, man, thinking to myself, "Man, is that lady out of touch with reality?" Eventually, between my junior and senior year of high school, I got a scholarship to go to a place called Deep Springs College and take a course for the summer. And that was what changed my life because it was Deep Springs is a very selective but tiny, tiny, tiny college, and I just did really well there. So once that was the first time I read really great books in a group of people who were intellectually serious and all trying to move towards insights through dialogue. So that was what hooked me. So basically, I was rejected. So then I applied to Deep Springs when I was a high school senior, and I was rejected from every college that I applied to except Deep Springs. So I went to Deep Springs for 2 years. It's just a 2 year school. And that was fantastic. I just loved it. It was paradise. Like finally, I was being rewarded for doing what I had been punished for doing in high school, which is reading these books on my own. And then after that, believe it or not, I was able, because I did so well there, I was able to actually transfer into Yale University. So I got into Yale University, and I was, I was probably the undergraduate with the lowest high school GPA of any student in my class. I was off the bell curve.
So you were serious about going to those Ivy League schools, like the top schools, right? Or were you just, put yanking the counselor's chain?
There was, so I think the self-flattering version is I read an article in the New York Times Magazine about these philosophers who were at Yale, Jacques Derrida and Paul de Man, literary critics too, and how they were so serious. They were kind of at the center, and they all took Nietzsche very seriously, so that appealed to me. But I also think when you're young and you don't know what you want, you tend to want what other people want just because other people want it. And so the honest truth is that I also in part wanted to go there just because that was the place to go. And I had absolutely no idea what I was getting into.
How do you go from that to teaching, though?
How did I go from that to teaching? I just felt like once I got to Yale, it just seemed like I had been really depressed for years and years. And it was so wonderful to be in a group of smart, thoughtful, passionate, intelligent people, all devoted to what they were doing. Despite what everybody says about Yale, it's actually a very good school. And I was actually, well, I'll say this: it was divided. Part of it was just a meritocratic rat race of people trying to jump through hoops to get good grades so they could get a good job afterwards. That was part of it. And then the other part of it was a serious intellectual community of people just working hard to try to see things that no one has ever been able to see before. So part of it was the biggest disappointment of my life, and part of it was what inspired me to become a professor and to keep going.
Do you think any part of that desire to do that was to maybe take some of these younger people that either are being somewhat forced to go to college or feel like they have to go to college, to sort of take them from where you were in high school, hating school and being angry, and teaching them and bringing them to find that there are good things out there. And you, just like you said, you have to reach for them. You have to educate yourself. You have to read,
I think that, people, it was Plutarch who said, education isn't filling a bucket, it's lighting a fire, right? It's not just pouring the contents from the professor's mind into the student's mind. It's igniting the student's desire and ability to think for him or herself. And so I think kind of at the very bottom, what was wrong with my high school education was they were just trying to fill buckets, basically. And I feel like students want an education because they want a good life, right? And to live a good life, you have to be able to see things for what they are. And you see things for what they are by studying, by reading, by listening, by thinking, by writing out and working out your own understanding. I think when students see the connection between their desire to live a good life and academic study, that's what ignites a fire and makes them want to study and do it seriously. But if academics is just a bunch of hoops that you have to jump through to please your teachers or professors, it's just the most sterile, depressing, boring, meaningless exercise in the whole world.
Well, you are talking to somebody who dropped out of high school for all of those reasons. So when you said you were the angriest high school student, I thought to myself, I don't know about that, but I don't want to burst his bubble or anything.
Maybe the second angriest.
But I do find that the way, at least I don't know how it is in Canada, Tim, or around the world, to be honest with you, but I know for me and for a lot of people in the United States, the education system, especially the lower grades, have a big problem with, teaching to the test and, like you said, a big data dump. And there's no learning incentive. There's nothing saying this is why we do it and this is how we learn and this is the reason why it's so important. How do you get that across to your students, especially someone like me? I mean, I did eventually go and get my GED, and I did go to some college. In fact, I took philosophy and writing and things of that. I'm a computer person, but I decided to not do that in college. But how would you take someone, a student like me, who really is not a school student, but for whatever reason they're now entering into college, and turn that kind of thinking around? And can you tell them when the students first come into your room at the start of the semester,
Mm-hmm.
can you pick them out?
You could not right away, not right away. But I would say this: what I do, I say I teach liberal arts, so I teach in a great books program. So it's all small, student-centered, discussion-based classes, right? So we read classic texts, and then we sit in a circle and we talk about them. The notion being that what we're doing is not just trying to move from ignorance to knowledge, but from a kind of average level of understanding to a genuine level of understanding. And what that requires, though, is for us to move from inauthentic understanding that we've just absorbed from other people, towards our own understanding, and understanding that's based on our own thinking, our own reading, our own conversation, our own reflection. So you start with a text that speaks to people where they are, like the way that Epictetus spoke to me, right? You start with texts that are bound to matter to students because they're about friendship, about how to deal with anger, about what to do when you're stuck in a place that you don't want to be, about what it means to be free. What is good work? Like, what kind of work should we aspire to? What can money buy that contributes to a good life? And what are the moral hazards of money? We'll put it that way. You start with questions that students just naturally care about, and then you have to actually be interested in what they think, because students are surprising, right? You have to listen to each student to try to understand where they're coming from, what their background is, what informs their experience, and what informs their views, right? And if you get a discussion going and you get the students talking to each other about matters they really care about, then the whole class by itself will just start move towards a level of understanding that nobody has in advance, including me. So I think that the discussion-based method of teaching is the way to go. Textbooks, lectures, exams, that whole pedagogy may work occasionally in some contexts, but I think for the most part, if we're trying to really develop our ability to think, speak, listen, write on our own, textbooks, lectures, and exams are not the way to go. The way to go is discussion-based learning.
So tell us a little bit about philosophy of writing. I mean, like I said, I read that it took you a while to write that book, and you said that it was a very difficult process. And had someone told you at the get-go that it might have been, you might not have started it. So I want to know what it was that brought you to that book. Well, first, maybe we should have you tell us a little bit about the book, and then how that book came to be, why it was so difficult, and what made you keep going.
So it requires a little bit of background. I'll say when I was in graduate school, the way I earned money was I taught composition courses. I taught writing courses. And I was given a textbook, and the textbook was mostly a set of recipes, like directives on how to construct sentences, make paragraphs, how to organize an outline. But there was no reflection on what writing was or what the point of writing was. So it seemed like it was kind of inclining professors to turn writing assignments into hoops that students had to jump through. And I felt like there's something wrong with this way of teaching writing. So I started working. The director of the program let me work out my own course, and then later on, when I got my PhD, I was hired to do philosophy, but also to teach writing at the same time. So I started teaching it. But there were three experiences that were important that happened really when I was an undergraduate. One was I took a course in close reading, and we would be assigned to read these texts carefully, and I would go home. I would read them as carefully as I possibly could, really, really, really paying attention to everything. And I would come to class. We'd have a discussion. The professor would ask questions. People would point to things in the text and talk about them. And suddenly, I could see things in the text that I hadn't been able to see on my own. It was just incredible. It was miraculous. It's like once you see it, you're like, how did I miss it? How could I not see it? But I remember thinking, if you locked me in a room by myself with that book for a million years, I never would have been able to see that. But by sitting down and talking about things and having somebody point to things, you can see things on your own. It's an experience of illumination or revelation. It's an experience of a light bulb moment, right? That was very, very powerful because it happened over and over again. So second thing is, in that course, we read Swann's Way by Proust. And at a certain point, Proust describes that experience. He says, when I was reading my favorite author, an author named Bergot, he says, I was young, I was oblivious to the beauty of the world around me. But when Bergot pointed out something whose beauty I hadn't been able to perceive, he could use some image or some metaphor, and that beauty would explode into my consciousness. Things that had been hidden from me before, suddenly I could see them. And I thought, oh, this is exactly the experience that I'm having in class. I had no words for it though, except this description. And then spring of my senior year, I took a course on Heidegger, Martin Heidegger, German philosopher. And he has a notion of truth, which I think really helped me to understand what was going on. He says, usually when we speak about truth, we speak about it in a very commonsensical way. Truth means correspondence with reality. You know, a theory is true if it fits the facts. A portrait is true if it represents the person it portrays. A story is true if it corresponds to reality. But he says, sometimes we use the word truth to mean something else, like we speak of the moment of truth, right? This happened when my sister-in-law was pregnant and they didn't have an ultrasound, so we didn't know whether it was going to be a boy or a girl. Her water broke, and my older brother called me up and said, the moment of truth has come. Myself, yes, but what is truth? What does truth mean there? And I think what it means is what's been hidden, the sex of your unborn child, is about to be revealed. You know, something that couldn't be seen is going to come to light and be seen. And Heidegger says that's a deeper sense of truth. That level of truth makes possible truth in the common sense. And that's what Proust had been describing when he described the power of reading as a revelatory power. And that's what I had been experiencing in the classroom. So that was what set me off in the direction. I was like Heidegger and all the people who came after Heidegger, Hannah Arendt, Hans-Georg Gadamer, Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Paul Ricoeur, Charles Taylor. I wanted to study those philosophers. But it had to do with understanding that the experiences in school that really mattered to me, that changed me and formed me as a person, were aiming at a kind of truth that wasn't just scientific or scholarly knowledge. It was really deep insight, we'll put it that way.
What was it that made the book so difficult to write, and why did it take you 25 years to do it? I'm not going to let that go.
No, this is good. This is exactly right. Because when I started, I just didn't have the language to explain what I wanted to explain. I was trying to talk about something for which I had no words. And so it's like a fly running into a window. There's some sort of barrier that you can't get past it. But you don't know what's standing in the way. I'll put it that way. So
Yep.
I don't want to go too deeply into this, but I just think that a contemporary philosophy, how can I say this without offending people or
Good luck.
flying like hordes of people with pitchforks and torches to my door? Contemporary philosophy is trying to model itself on, it's trying to pretend to be a science. It's trying to be one department among others in the university. It's trying to pretend that it offers kind of scientific or quasi-scientific or scholarly knowledge. And that's great. That's fantastic. I support that 100%. We should all be good scholars. But I think real philosophy is not about gaining knowledge. It's about gaining wisdom. We'll put it that way. And I think the truth of wisdom is not the same as the truth of knowledge. I think wisdom is the way the world appears to us in light of our character and in light of our experience. And that kind of appearing or that kind of illumination is not something that can be captured in terms of epistemology or contemporary philosopher. It's interesting that most philosophers today, even though philosophy means love of wisdom, they never talk about wisdom. Like books have been written on the question, what is philosophy? And the word wisdom doesn't appear in those books. It's striking, right? Like why is this word that for the Greeks was absolutely central is completely absent? If you ask philosophers today for wisdom, they look at you with like condescension and pity, right? Like you're this naive person, right? I think it's because the phenomenon of wisdom is something that just eludes or escapes the conceptual language of most philosophers today. They don't have the conceptual resources to really grasp what wisdom is, and therefore it's something that's easily ignored. The other thing is the paradox of wisdom is, I think wisdom is the ultimate goal of education, and at the same time, wisdom can't be taught, right? It can't be put in words and communicated directly from one person to another. So it's a little bit scandalous to have a teaching institution whose ultimate purpose is to aim at something that can't be taught.
Yeah. Do you think it's about existence? I mean, like you mentioned Nietzsche earlier, and the kind of what I was looking at philosophy in the early days and to this day, um, my goal in life is to become a wise old man or a mensch, right? In the Jewish word, but and I think I've achieved that. Or I'm working on it still, right? Obviously, but a lot of what we think of philosophy and religion, if I can use that word too, is that it's about what are we doing here and where are we going next, and that's kind of what people struggle with, and that's where different schools of philosophy kind of try to answer that question. Although, like you said, since they're not scientists, science is somebody's conception of it, right?
Yeah, I think Nietzsche is a good example of how someone's thinking is actually grounded in their own experience, because Nietzsche
Hmm.
was really sick for a long time. I mean, he had to give up his job. Had migraines, vomiting, phlegm. He was in very bad shape. And he said, that colored my whole view of life. And then when I got better and I convalesced, um, I suddenly was able to see the world from a new perspective, from the
Hmm.
perspective of health and gratitude and kind of gratuitous joy. And he says, so I saw the world from the perspective of the sick, and I saw the world from the perspective of health. And neither perspective was definitive, right? But
Right. Yep.
because what made me a philosopher is my ability to reverse perspectives and to see the same thing from the perspective of one kind of experience and the perspective of another kind of
And to try to share that with people without them having to go through being sick, right?
experience.
Or yeah.
I think we all have to go through sickness at a certain point, and
Well, yeah. I mean, we all have to take our knocks and get knocked down, and then, I mean, I had a major life event happen to me in my 30s, late 30s, and I don't look at life the same way anymore.
yeah, I think that like when Heidegger in Being in Time talks about what it means to be human, it's always in the context of somebody who's active, who's using equipment, who's engaged in the world, getting things done, being an agent who can try to bend the world to his will.
Hmm.
I think when you're sick, you're not an agent anymore. You're a patient, right?
Right.
You are passive. You are suffering, right? When you get really sick, you fall out of daily time, right? You're
Yeah.
no like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, 8 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock at night. You're no longer in time in the same way,
Yeah.
and so your relation to the world is no longer one where you're the master seizing and grasping and controlling. Your relation to the world is you're being touched and struck and moved by things that you can't master and that are beyond your control.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that's a part of our life all the time, but it's a part that we tend to suppress or ignore that just comes out when we become sick.
Yeah.
So,
We take that for granted. We take for granted that Wednesday is the thing that we should care about. When you're sick, you're thinking about breathing and swallowing and breathing some more.
we also, when you're active and you're healthy, it seems you have the illusion that the future is something you can count on. And we kind of have to
Mm,
think this way, right? Yeah, I have a
right.
calendar on my computer. I call my telephone my prosthetic brain because I wake up in the morning and my telephone tells me what to do, right? You have you have to act as though you can count on the future, right?
Mm,
But what sickness tells you is the authentic future is something that you just cannot foresee. Like things are going to happen to you completely beyond all foresight and control, and that's going to happen. Things are coming that there's just no way that you can anticipate. So I think
yeah.
being sick, and also the other thing is the authentic future is finite, right? We each have a certain number of days. Our days are numbered, and we don't know what that number is. And so we have to on the one hand, we have to see time from the perspective of health, and you can't live your life as though every day were your last day, right? You have to
Hmm.
plan for the future, et cetera. And at the same time, you have to remember that the future is not something you can count on, because the authentic future is something which is beyond all foresight or control.
That's true. Yeah, you can make plans, especially as we get older. You can make plans for like what I'm doing next November, but I may not get there, right? So, but then by the same token, you sort of have to stop and realize that this flower in front of me smells really nice, you know?
Yeah, I just got a letter a couple of weeks ago from the Social Security Agency that informed me that I can expect to live for another 23 years. Like,
Nice, cool.
according to the actuarial tables, I have 23 years that I can count on average. We'll put it that way.
Just
Yeah,
enough
yeah,
time to write another book.
yeah.
Almost.
So I did an entrepreneurial coaching thing many years ago, almost 20 years ago, I guess, and one of the exercises we do at the very beginning of the program is called the life extender.
Ah,
And the life extender is, you're going to go through this program and you're going to learn how to run like a proper entrepreneur. You're going to have, going to build a team around yourself. You're going to get healthy. You're going to exercise. You're going to read. You're going to go on vacation. You're going to take time for yourself. So the first part of the exercise is how old are you going to be when you die? Right. So I had a horoscope read for me when I was a little kid, and my date is 73. Right. And so the whole idea is, okay, you do all this stuff, you learn to become healthy, you learn to, deal with all the sort of anxieties and things that make you stressed and whatever. Why are you going to die when you're 73? What's your new number? Right. So my number became 85. Right. But, that it's kind of like most people go through life. Again, get your pitchforks ready, folks. Um, most people go through life going from Monday to Friday, and then, or they celebrate hump day, or you know what I mean? Like they're just going through, I'm going to go to school, then I'm going to get married, then I'm going to have kids, I'm going to buy a house, and then I'm going to work for X number of years. And these days you work at many different jobs, and then you're going to retire when you're 65. Then what are you going to do? Right? So
It's funny that you mentioned that. We're sitting here talking about, having a better life and extending life and just going out and finding what's important. And to me, and I think you mentioned this, that communication, and I might be wrong about what you said in the book there, but communication isn't just about writing. It's a practiced form of solitary meditation.
mm-hmm.
And I find that because I'm also an author, and when I write, sometimes I get frustrated and I'm not meditating at all. I will tell you that. But other times I do find that it brings me some peace, and it allows me to sort of slow down and, as Tim said, stop and smell the flowers. Most people don't argue that point, and yet you did, David, and I want to know how you arrived at that conclusion.
I just think that the way I was taught to write in school was you I was taught formulate a thesis and then write a 5-paragraph essay laying out the evidence to prove the thesis, right? So the implication is first you get knowledge, or first you have a belief, and then you try to prove or demonstrate it to other people. And so that was my academic writing for a while. But at the same time, when there are things when I had insights that came to me or something that I wanted to remember, I would start to write it down. I would make a note to myself. And then I started doing that more and more. And then I found that when I wrote things down, it helped me piece together an understanding of the world, right? I started to see connections between different ideas that I had. So it's like when I started this book, I was teaching freshman composition in my first job as a professor. And I was trying to just think about what writing is and how to do it. I kept writing notes to myself. When I found a quotation that I thought was really important, I would write it down. And those became the quotations that are, the quotations that begin the book. So what you learn from experience when you start to write is that it's not that we have an idea and then we write it down. It's the act of trying to put our thoughts into words helps us deepen, clarify, refine, sharpen, complicate our understanding of things, so that writing is not just it is a way to communicate with other people, and that's good, but it's also a way for us to work out our own understanding. There was a quote by Hannah Arendt that made a big difference to me. If I can read it, because I wrote a book. My first book was about Hannah Arendt, and she said, "When I'm working, I'm not interested in how my work might affect other people. What's important for me is to understand. For me, writing is a matter of seeking this understanding, part of the process of understanding. What's important to me is the thought process itself." So I just think that's really true. Maybe if I may, I'll just read another quote. This is from Michel Foucault. This is from a tiny little book of interviews. But he said, "The books I write constitute an experience for me that I like to be as rich as possible. An experience is something you come out of changed. If I had to write a book to communicate what I've already thought, I'd never have the courage to begin it. I write because I don't yet know what to think about a subject that attracts my interest. In doing so, the book transforms me, changes what I think. As a consequence, each new work profoundly changes the terms of thinking which I had reached with the previous work. When I write, I do it above all to change myself and not to think the same thing as before." So I think what that implies is that writing changes us. Writing changes our thinking in the same way that physical exercise changes our body or meditation changes our soul, right? It's a practice that you do in order to work on yourself and to develop your thinking and not just to communicate to other people thoughts you've already had.
Both of those quotes are very interesting to me. I don't want to speak for Tim, but but I will.
But you will,
I'm
yeah.
so good at it. But both him and I do technical writing. You know, we take complex topics and we break it down and hopefully teach other people how to do things, mostly in the development or the creative tech world. And I find that one of the things that draws me to doing that is exactly what those quotes said and what I think they mean, in that when I set out to write about a topic, I don't know everything about that topic. I need to go and learn more about it and fully understand it, right? The best way to learn something is to teach, is what they say. And what's interesting is I recently went back to my fiction roots and I started working on a novel that is heavily influenced by Greek mythology. And I was surprised to find out that the same applies to storytelling as it does to teaching, because there was a lot. I mean, I thought I knew about Greek mythology. I was always interested in it as a kid, but I didn't know what I thought I know. And having gone down that rabbit hole, it is so much a feeling of I'm learning more about the topic. I'm learning more about myself. I'm learning more about writing and the process of everything. So I really appreciate you bringing both of those to the show. I had never heard either one of them, and I think they're both really good.
I think it's also true that we, the experiences that form us, the experiences that really make us who we are, tend to be experiences that really touch and strike and move us, even when we're not prepared for them and we don't have any words for them. They reduce us to silence. And so, like when you lose a loved one, it's hard to handle. It reduces you to silence, right? So I think that we have experiences within us, and the truth of those experiences, for which we have no words, right? It's what the example I think of is it's like what photography used to be, right? Just as those old time photographers with film cameras would expose the film to the world, but couldn't see what the picture was, right? They had to protect the film inside the camera, because if you exposed it too early, you would ruin it, right? You have to take what you've been exposed to into darkness, right? And then bathe it in these fluids that develop it and allow it to become visible. So in the same way, the truth of our experience, it's in us, but it's in us, it's registered in us the way the images are registered in film, right? We have to protect it in silence in order, and then descend into darkness and try to put what we've been through, what we've experienced, into words. And putting things into words is the way that we develop it and bring it out into the light of day, so that we can see it clearly in the light of understanding.
When you sat down to write this book, what knowledge or wisdom were you imparting on your readers, and what do you hope that they get out of reading your book?
I hope that they will just start to see writing as a path to understanding, to their own authentic understanding. that writing is the way for them to come into the possession of the truth of their own experience. So I write the book in order to try to lead people to see things from a particular point of view, but I don't want people to share my. It'd be great for people to share my ideas, but I think the most important thing is I want people to see writing as an intellectually and spiritually serious practice that we can do every day in order to move little bit by little towards greater understanding, towards deeper, clearer, more precise, more complex, more refined, more authentic understanding.
Do you think that the process of writing is enough? And what I mean by that is, does it matter if anyone reads your words? Do you still encourage people to write?
Yes, but I think it's good to write. I think you begin writing for yourself, but I think you also, I think you want, I think you feel alone in the world unless you can share some understanding with other people, right? I think we want to, we would feel forlorn and completely isolated unless we could share an understanding with other people. So you write for yourself, but you also want to communicate with other people. To do that, you also need feedback, you need criticism, you need people who are going to tell you what you've written and what's good and what's not so good. So I think that there's two parts of the creative process. One is the kind of inspiration and intuitive act of creation. And then there's the long process of revising and refining and restructuring and putting things together.
See, that was my sneaky way of getting us to the next part of the questions that I love talking about, and that is the editorial process. How was that for you? Because you worked with a publisher on this. This was not a self-published book, correct?
Yeah, this was published by Bloomsbury Press.
Yeah. So what was it that made you decide to go that route? Like, how did you find an agent? How did you find a publisher, an editor? What was the whole process like for you?
It could not possibly, yeah. You're making me sound more sophisticated than I actually am. I published my first book with Cambridge University Press because they have an interest in Hannah Arendt, and that's who I was writing about. And so I submitted this manuscript to my editor at Cambridge, Hilary Gaskin, and she said, "This is a lovely book, but it's not the kind of thing that Cambridge publishes. You might want to try Matt Rahal at Princeton University Press." So I met with him. He's a wonderful person, a great editor, but he also said, "This is a wonderful book. It's not quite the kind of thing that Princeton publishes," because it's also kind of a how-to manual. The last part of the book is more of a handbook on writing. So he suggested Bloomsbury, because Bloomsbury's published books about writing by Mark Edmondson, for example, at University of Virginia. So I just, out of the blue, I just submitted it to Bloomsbury, and they liked it. We'll put it that way. I mean, I'd kind of sweated blood and tears to get it as clear and coherent and short as possible. So it actually, they didn't ask for a lot of revisions. We'll put it that way.
Oh, that's good. That's real good. Did you work alone on that process, or did you have a trusted friend?
I mostly worked alone. I have, I really believe in collaboration. And my twin brother, Michael, is a screenwriter, and I try to collaborate with him on, or help him on his screenplays. But this particular book was a very personal book. So it was something that I wrote the whole thing and made it the best possible version that I could. And then people seemed to think that was fine. So it didn't actually require a lot of revision.
I got to ask you about your software and the technology that you used. Was it pen and paper, the first draft, word processor? What were you using?
I just used Apple, the word processing program Pages, Apple Pages.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how to use it. It's really convenient, intuitive, but I'll say this, I think I did an earlier version, and I showed it to a a couple of professors who are friends of mine at St. Mary's, and they had objections and responses, but it wasn't ready at that point, and I kind of knew it wasn't ready. Like when they said this seems a little muddled or confused, I was like, you know what, you're right. So I think part of the difficulty of writing is just having the patience to wait until it's completely well done. Put it that way. That's why it took such a long time. I started writing it in really 1999, and it was published in 2026. So it was a long time coming. I had to write my first book though, in order to get the conceptual language that would let me write my second book. We'll put it that way.
That was, and I can't pronounce the name. I'm terrible with names, but that's the Arnott on the political. Was that your first one?
Yeah, Hannah Arendt.
Okay. Arnott. I see you even said it and I can't say it. I'm just terrible with names. It's just awful. What made you write that book?
I just felt like there's something wrong with American politics today, something deeply wrong with our political culture today. And part of what's wrong is just a debased and superficial understanding of what politics is. That politics is essentially a kind of war for power, this amoral struggle for the power of government over citizens. And Hannah Arendt said that's a very late and derivative understanding of politics. If you go back to the Greeks and you read what they wrote about politics, she says, if they didn't theorize about it, they just lived it. But if you explicate their understanding, for them to live a political life was to be a citizen of a self-governing community, so that politics was a way of being together based on principles of equality and nonviolence, in which citizens decided what to do and how to live together through mutual deliberation and persuasion on topics of common concern, public concern, we'll put it that way. So part of it was also that I was a big reader of Heidegger, and Heidegger, whatever his merits, was also a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party. And Hannah Arendt was very interesting because she was Jewish. She was born in Germany. She had been a student of Heidegger, but she was also jailed by the Nazis in the police presidium in Berlin, managed to get out, escaped to Paris, and then was sent from Paris into a concentration camp in the south of France, managed to get out of that. Everybody who stayed behind in that concentration camp was shipped to Auschwitz. She managed to get an emergency visa to come to the United States. And so she felt like she had learned a lot from Heidegger, but of course detested his politics. So part of her whole life's work was to take this way of thinking that she had learned from Heidegger and use it to work out a more democratic and pluralistic understanding of what politics is. So that's what I wanted to bring out in my book. The basic project was to show that Hannah Arendt took Heidegger's way of thinking and used it to work out a very un-Heideggerian concept of the political. And that this also helps us to understand the Declaration of Independence, too. So the last chapter is like a 100-page reading, very close reading of the Declaration of Independence.
Do you think, had you not written that first book, that the philosophy of writing would not have come to fruition?
Yeah, it's something. Yeah, you think, why did it take so long for me to write this second book? But I had to write the first book first. And yeah, it's true also, I see it in my brother when he writes screenplays, right? That you reach a point where the project is just not going to move forward. And so you have to put that project on the back burner and work on something else. Working on something else will teach you things that will then let you return to that earlier project and see it through. So people talk about writer's block, right? Running into writer's block. I've never had writer's block. I never experienced that. What I experience is wandering into the fog and just getting lost and having no sense of direction and not being able to see where I'm going. So I was wandering in the fog for a long time, and I had to write my first book to get out of the fog and write my second book.
Did you outline your second book or just dive right in? Like what was that process?
Yeah, no, I feel like I'm an outliner. I feel like you need to work on the same project at different levels of generality. So you need to have an outline. You need to have like a one sentence one sentence for every paragraph, and then you need to have the whole text that you're working on. And if you have those side to side, then it helps to go back and forth between different levels of generality. So you can see you have the view from ground level, this granular view of your project, and then you can zoom back to 30,000 feet and see your project from the perspective that lets you see it as a whole. So when I write, I have two columns on my computer. I have the outline on one side that gives me the 30,000 foot perspective, and then I have what I'm actually writing on the right side, which is the granular ground level point of view. But you need those two different levels of generality in order to be able to see what you're doing.
Did you write in order, chapter order, or did you jump around?
I jumped around a bit. Yeah, I think actually the fourth section is what came first. All the practical advice is the earliest stuff.
Are you referring to the 50 principles at the end?
Principles. That was written 25 years ago. The afterword I wrote at the very, very end, right? That was when I could finally see the whole project and how it fit together. So I was like, oh, I should write an afterword that explains how I came to write this book. What was interesting actually is that the last chapter that I wrote is kind of a middle chapter, which is about inspiration and the experience of inspiration, which is, I think if you're when I was in graduate school, I had a friend who was interested in writing about inspiration and was told by her professors, that's too metaphysical, it's too airy-fairy, you can't talk rigorously about that. But if you're an artist, inspiration is one of the most important things in the world to you, right? You want to get to the point where your project possesses you, right? It comes over you and you are completely absorbed in it to the point that when I get absorbed in a project, I wake up at 4:30 in the morning because my body wants to get up and start working on it. And it takes no willpower at all. My body wakes up because that's what I want to do. But that only works when you're inspired. And I made the mistake for a long time of thinking, oh, first you wait for inspiration and then you start to work once it hits. No, that's the classic blunder. I think the more you work, the more likely it is the inspiration is going to come. But you have to just slog it out every day. Every day you have to try to do a little bit more, whether you feel like it or not. And if you do that daily slog, it's more likely that inspiration will hit.
Is there like a target number that you recommend to your students if they're writing something, like if you want to write these many words per day or anything like that?
No, I think it's just the amount of time. I would say just try to give yourself 20 or 30 minutes a day to just leave the surface of life and descend to the depths. Call yourself back to what really matters. Try to collect your thoughts. How much time do people spend meditating every day? I mean, I think a lot of people do it for 20 minutes a day, and it changes their whole life. So I think that it's a mistake to fetishize trying to produce a certain number of words a day because sometimes you wander into the fog and you just wander in circles and nothing happens. But you can't get discouraged. I think if you keep trying to find your way, eventually you move up and you emerge from the fog, and then it just comes easily. Then it just comes it just writes itself. So I wouldn't fetishize trying to do a certain number. I know that there literally are. I think Mark Twain, literally, you can see in his manuscripts, he would count up the number of words he had written every day because I think he gave himself 250 words or something. So you can see in the margin, like 197. I've gotten to 197.
I have to ask one more question because my younger son always runs into this. He's third year now. He'll be starting. And one thing that frustrates him and me is that the professors, aside from accusing him of using AI to write his papers, which is not true. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people do use it, but I know he does not. They're always targeting the word count. And it's frustrating. And I understand why they do it. Yeah. And he's always coming to me, and because I'm also an editor by trade. So I'm always looking over his papers. And he's like, yeah, I got to add the word count. I said, yeah, but this is being redundant. He says, I know, but they want the word count. I said, well, you need to find a new way to say it because you can't be redundant. But it's so frustrating that, back to this whole word count thing, I think it's ridiculous. I know that certain times you need it, and I'm just curious what your opinion on that is, being a professor yourself. Because what do I know? I'm a high school dropout.
There's committees at my college that say students have to write at least for say a freshman level class, they have to write 20 pages of writing over the semester. So the first assignment needs to be 6, and the next assignment needs to be 6 pages, and the final assignment needs to be 8 pages. I tell my students, they say the number of pages, but they don't say in what font and in what
or how many double spaced or whatever, yeah,
etc. So if you can say something important, original, and insightful in very few words, great. Make it as concise as possible. That's a rule of good writing. Concise means no words wasted, right? So I'm not going to hold them to. I'm not going to say you have to write more than a certain number of words. I'm going to say what you have to say in as few words as possible. And if you can say something important, original, and insightful in 350 words, you get an A+ for the course. On the other hand, I also say I've had professors who said, I'm going to read up to this page and then I'm going to stop reading. And I think we learn to write by writing. So I say, number one, I'm willing to read as much as you're willing to write. You need to be concise. You need to be disciplined. You can't blather on and be verbose and bloviate, right? But if you have a project that takes 25 pages, I'll read it. I also say, I give, my students write a first draft and I give them a grade, but I have a policy. Every year I think I'm going to regret it, but I don't. I say infinite rewrites. If you get the grade and you're happy with it, you don't need to rewrite your paper. But if you want to work on your paper, I'll read as many drafts as you're willing to write by the end of the semester. And it's good for the students because we learn to write by writing, right? You just need to do it as much as possible. So yeah, I think word count. If you're training to be a journalist, right? Journalists are, here's the number of words you have to do. They're in some context, you're given a certain number of words you can't do anymore. I remember writing a letter of recommendation for a student for a Rhodes Scholarship, and they were like, you have 500 words. And I started with a letter that was 1,300 words. So I had to pack it down to 500. Sometimes you need to do that. But when I'm teaching writing, I don't insist on a certain length, either long or short.
So you reminded me of a story that I'd completely forgotten about until this very moment here. But when I was in university, I was studying art, and we had we did some experimental art. And we had our art department, our art building had a big, giant open area, in the center of it, right? So I got my friends and I to hang a piece of rope, must have been 200, 300 feet long. And we got about 30 pages of newspaper, and we taped them all together to spell the word no.
Ah.
So my assignment I handed in was one word. and the best part was I didn't tell anybody why I was doing it, and people guessed, they're wondering what does this no mean. It was just my way of expressing a piece, right? So
that was your 30-page paper right there.
But it was 30-page literal newspaper, but yeah, it had one word.
Enjoying the show? Good. We want to keep it that way. If you've got a guest suggestion, a story to share, or just something to say, we want to hear from you. Send us a message at interviews@roundaboutcreativechaos.com. Now, where were we?
We have this part of the show where we have, and surprisingly, it's basically based on the work of Marcel Proust. You're probably familiar with the Marcel Proust questionnaire. Anyway, so this is the Tammy questionnaire. Sometimes I throw in a few Colbert questions in there, but this is it's a lot of these questions are lifted right from the Marcel questionnaire. So if you are seated comfortably, we can dig right in.
Yep.
All right. So it's funny because I've been listening to the questions going on through the show, and they could have come from these questions. So the first question is, what is your favorite word?
I would say illumination, because that captures the dimension of truth that that's not just correspondence with reality. It's the experience of revelation. It's the experience of suddenly the light bulb moment that lets us see something that hadn't been seen before. So in my writing, when I say, "Oh, this is really illuminating," it's a very colloquial way to talk about a very, I think, rigorous and important concept of truth.
Yeah, it reminds me of a cartoon I saw once where it's a woman handing a kid a book and saying, "It's called a book. It's how we install software in our brain." All right. What is your least favorite word?
I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. I think the word religion is just inherently confusing. I don't think the things that are called religions have anything essential in common with each other. Uh, Buddhism, Hinduism, Greek polytheism, Christianity. I don't think these. I don't think there's anything that these things rigorously have in common. So I think when I'm trying to speak rigorously and precisely, I don't use the word religion. I speak
Right.
spiritual traditions or spiritual practices or faith or something like that. But I think religion is a word that I avoid because I think it just inherently leads to confusion.
Okay, this question might be a slam dunk, but which do you like the most? Books, movies, music, or games?
I like
Games, right?
I like
Books. He likes books, Tammy. There's a surprise. So, who's your favorite fictional character?
I like Zarathustra from Nietzsche's book Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Hmm.
Uh, just a solitary, cheerful, funny philosopher. I think that the notion, Zarathustra goes out and lives in solitude for 10 years before he comes back and the book begins. And I think the experience of solitude is important to philosophy. So there's something in it's not really the character himself, it's more the tone of the book, which is a high spirited, like there's kind of a seriousness and playfulness at the same time, right? There's a real commitment to trying to see hard truths, and at the same time a kind of cheerfulness to the writing, and also a sense of tragedy and loneliness at the same time. It's the pathos of the book that really appealed to me before I really understood anything about it. So it's part of it was a formative book when I read it.
What's the most interesting place you've ever been?
I would say Deep Springs College. Have you heard of it? Do you know of it at all?
No.
Deep.
No, you mentioned it in your bio. Yeah.
It before. So it's the smallest college in America. There's 26 students. It's only a 2-year college. Every student is on a full room board tuition scholarship. So the college is free. And because of that, it gets these really bright, ambitious, thoughtful students. But it's also located on a cattle ranch in the desert of Eastern California between the Sierras and Death Valley. And
Hmm.
students are required to do 20 hours of work on the ranch every week, 20 hours of work or ranch work a week. Plus, the students, it's because it's so small and it's run on a shoestring budget. And also, as part of the educational experience, student government is really powerful there. Like the committee that decides which professors will be hired and that decides which students will be admitted, 9 of the 11 members of that committee are students. So
Oh, wow.
student self-government is very, very powerful there. The underlying philosophy is students learn to be responsible by being given real responsibilities and held to them. So I went there for 2 years. I went there for summer, and then I went there for 2 years. And then I came back and I taught as a professor for 6 years. And then I've taught for 3 summer programs along with that. It's number one, it's a beautiful place out in this empty valley in the middle of the desert. Number two, it's very intellectually rigorous and intense. I hate to say it, but having been to Deep Springs, I went to Yale, and Yale was kind of a disappointment. And number three, it was just a very so when I was there, I milked cows, I worked as a janitor, I bucked hay, I washed dishes. I remember, there's bales of hay out on the field. The rain is coming. Those bales need to get out the field. Someone needs to go get on the flatbed and get those bales into the stack yard. And it doesn't matter how you feel. That work needs to be done. So it was a very formative experience in helping me learn how to work in a focused, disciplined, and systematic way. And the other thing is, you go out into the desert, and you are it's a kind of depth of solitude that's hard to explain. If I'm alone in the middle of a city, I'm alone, but I'm surrounded by evidence of other human beings. It's like
Right.
I'm on a stage, but there's seats that testify to the possibility of an audience, right? Whereas going out in the desert is like walking off the stage, through the stage door, and out into the parking lot, right? And seeing the sky for the first time. You're alone in the sense that there is just no audience. You're alone with yourself in a way that's hard to be alone when you're in civilization. We'll put it that way. So
Right.
it had a very deep effect on me. It's you should look it up, because it was it was probably the best experience of my life for 2 years. And it's this just this dinky little college way out in the middle of nowhere, literally a cow college, a junior college in the middle of nowhere. But it
Hmm.
was the most kind of both intellectually serious and spiritually transformative place that I've ever been.
Yeah. How did you end up getting? It's invite only, right? How did you end up getting
Yeah,
there?
I took the PSATs and I did well on them. And so they sent me a brochure, and I looked at the brochure and I threw it in the garbage. And my mother fished it out of the garbage and said, David, you might want to take a look at this place. This would be a good thing to do. And so I applied, and somehow I got in. So
All right. Who's the most interesting person you've ever met?
I studied with a philosopher named Jacques Derrida, who was a French philosopher. He's known for what's called deconstruction. And he taught at UC Irvine for 5 weeks a year when I was a grad student there. And I worked as his research assistant for three terms when he was there. His writing is very difficult and notoriously opaque, but he himself, when you talk to him in person, he could lay things out so clearly. It was really it was a miracle. It was incredible. In seminars, if somebody asked a question, he could spin straw into gold. Somebody asked
Mm.
a kind of superficial and misguided question, he could see where they're coming from. He could see the grain of insight in what they were saying, and he could respond in a way that made the question look like the most brilliant question in the whole world.
Mm.
The other thing was, you could never predict what he was going to say. If he was going to do a reading of a text, you couldn't. He would find something in the text that you couldn't foresee. That's what he would focus on. So he wasn't predictable. And the other thing I'll say is, of all the teachers I've ever had in any school, he gave me more feedback on my writing than anyone else. And he was a superstar professor, so he could have just blown off his students and slapped on a grade and not given us any feedback. But instead, when I wrote papers for him, I got 3 pages of comments that showed he had read the paper super carefully. He understood my argument. He could see what I got. He could see what I was skimming over, or my blind spots, what I was missing. And he could ask questions that would nudge me to clarify and deepen my thought. And so that was really inspirational for me, because he was such a prestigious big name. He could have ignored his students and no one would have said anything. But even it wasn't just me. I was told that even at the end of his life, when he was dying of pancreatic cancer, he would read students' papers and give them 2 or 3 pages of feedback on each paper. So he was, whatever you think of him as a philosopher, he was a very generous person, and he was a very good teacher.
What's something you own that cannot be replaced?
Time. Time
Time.
cannot be. Everything else can be replaced. Time
But
cannot.
do you own time, really?
Yeah, I have my time. Yeah. I think Seneca says, if somebody came up to and said, "Oh, can I take some of your money and completely waste it and flush it down the toilet?" We would go like, "No, you can't have my money." But people are coming up to us every day and saying, "Oh, I want to waste your time." And we're like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead, waste my time." So
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's good to take ownership of our time. I think I love my mother and father. My father was as feminist as a person can get. But when I had 3 brothers when we were growing up, my father had ownership of his time, and my mother did not have ownership of her time. She was in charge of responding to every emergency, every guest, every interruption. Uh, she had very little time to herself. And I think if there was an inequality in my parents' marriage, it was he owned his time and she did not own her time. So I think, especially for women, to take ownership of their time is extremely important. You can't be a writer unless you take ownership of your time. So
Right.
it's something that you own, and it's once in a lifetime. It ain't coming back. Money can be lost and re-earned, but time wasted, it's gone, and it's gone for good.
What have you changed your mind about in the last year?
I think I'll go back, if I can go back for a little more than a year. The thing I got out of the COVID pandemic, before COVID, when people talked about morality in terms of purity and impurity, or purification and contamination, I just didn't know what they were talking about. It just had no meaning for me. But going through the experience of living through a contagious epidemic, and seeing also American political culture and what's been going on in our politics, I had the sense that um, dishonesty is contagious. Violence is contagious. I think it's true, even suicide. There are outbreaks or epidemics of suicide. And I think positive qualities. I think courage is contagious also. So before then, I kind of imagined human beings as self-sufficient and kind of cut off from their environment. But I think we're a lot more porous, a lot more open to influence than we would like to believe, both for good and bad. So I think that it's not that I changed my mind, but that something that had been meaningless to me before that experience, it opened. Now when I go back and I read, thinkers, religious thinkers who talk about purity and impurity, or purification and contamination, I feel like, they're trying to talk about something real, which is
Right.
the way that we're influenced by social contagion.
What is the worst job you've ever had?
I've worked as a janitor. I've washed dishes. I've milked cows. I've delivered papers, getting up at 3:45 every morning. Those were fine jobs. I don't want to point fingers or name names, but I had I wouldn't quite say insane and tyrannical, but I had a difficult boss at one point. And when I was working for this person, I started to have nightmares. And the nightmare was that I got a letter in the mail saying that I hadn't finished enough requirements to graduate from high school. I had to go back to high school again. Like, I thought I had escaped, but no, I'm back in high school. And I had this nightmare over and over again until I realized that the nightmare was trying to tell me, you've put yourself back in a situation where you're under the power of someone for whom you don't have any respect. And it's a very unhappy situation. So I don't care how much money the job pays or what kind of work it lets me do. I feel like, the kind of people you get to work with is really, that's the key to good work. So what was bad about the worst job I ever had was not the specific tasks that I was doing, but the kind of person that I was working for.
I second that answer
I third it.
wholeheartedly. You do, yeah?
I third it. Yeah, I third that one. Motion passed. What's your greatest achievement?
Ooh, I'm really proud of my book. Of course, I'm far too dignified to beg your listeners to buy my book.
I can beg for you. You should go out and buy his book. It's a good book. I'm reading it and I like it so far.
I feel like my book, that's my third proudest achievement. My second, first and second are my marriage and my daughter. That I've been married to my wife for 25 years. And I think happy marriage, like really happy marriages, are actually kind of few and far between. And like we've had difficult times, but we've come through them. And it's a huge source of happiness for me to be married to my wife and my daughter. My joke is that I know that every father in the world is deluded into thinking that his daughter is the most wonderful person in history. But the thing is, every father is wrong and I'm right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like my daughter's been just the easiest child to raise and just a source of pure joy every day.
What's your greatest regret?
Um, my father died when I was 19 years old. He was 46. I thought that I have more time with my father, right? I thought that, oh, we will have conversations later on. Oh, I can tell him, I can share with him things later on. And one day in the summer, he had a heart attack and he was gone with absolutely no warning. So it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. I was counting on a future that you just can't count on. So it's something. It's hard to live in with that awareness because you have to live as though the future can be counted on. You have to work on long-term projects while at the same time always being aware if there's something you want to tell a loved one, something you want to do, the time to do it is now. Like right now is the time to do it.
What do you fear the most?
I think when I was young I would have said death or dying young, but I think actually that what I fear most is wasting my life. I think that people fear death to the extent that they feel like their life has been squandered. I think that if you feel like this, I said my mother studied philosophy. She was never a philosophy professor, but she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, fought it for 5 years. At a certain point, had a stroke, and she decided my time has come. And she faced death with real courage and serenity. And I think she was able to do that because she felt like she had she was grateful for her whole life. And so I think that if if you can manage to live a good life, then you can die saying, I'm glad to have lived.
So I have a question for Tammy. Do I read the 13th question or do we read my optional question first?
No, you get to pick. The 12th one is your free for all. You pull in whichever one you want, my friend.
All right.
If it's the sandwich one, though, I'm going to need to find a new co-host.
Well, oh, come on. That's the best one. Okay, I'm going to ask 2 questions.
Okay.
So, what number am I thinking of?
4.
Oh, you were so close.
Well, what was the number?
No, it doesn't work that way.
Oh.
Yeah, I should ask you a philosophy question, but I won't.
Oh, you can ask the sandwich question if you want, Tim.
You've ruined it for me, though.
I ruin everything.
Here's one. Star Wars, Star Trek, Babylon 5, or Doctor Who?
Star Wars.
And why?
A New Hope, Star Wars 4, is one of the most, it's genius levels of simplicity in storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way that the story is laid out, it's like haiku of storytelling. Like there's nothing wasted. And the logic is just so incredibly clear. You try to write a story and you're like, oh, yeah, anyway, the logic of the story is incredibly clear.
I had you pegged for a Doctor Who fan.
Really?
I did.
Oh. I'm trying to find my Luke Skywalker quote or my Luke Skywalker story. I can't find it. Okay. Anyway, just one of the things I love about Mark Hamill is the way he signs his autographs.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is, now I can go to Toshi Station whenever I want. Okay, last question. Now this is a really important question for Tammy. What would you do in a zombie apocalypse?
You know who's thought a lot about this question? My daughter. My daughter thinks a lot about. She's like, I want to get up someplace high with a reliable source of water with a narrow entrance, so I can pick them off one by one as they try to get.
Right.
In. So she's put a lot of serious thought into this question. I would just want to be with her. Near our house, in front of our house, there's a water tower that serves the downhill community, and it has a very narrow stairway to get to the top. So if you got up on that, you'd have an infinite supply of water. and they'd have to come up one by one. You could pick them off pretty easily, I think.
You need a lot of bullets too, though.
No, you just need like a shovel or a rake or a mattock,
Oh, I
or
see.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to come up. They can't climb, just like they can't swim.
And they
Right?
can't float, right?
And
Amy?
they can't
Yeah.
float. They
Yeah.
would sink.
All you need is a good baseball bat or something like that, and you can pick them off one by one.
Oh my goodness. Well, David, I really appreciated you coming tonight and talking with us about your book and writing. And I do have so many more questions, and you are certainly welcome to hang with us in the after show, which usually it's just a couple more minutes after the show, but you're welcome to stay. You're welcome to go and maybe prepare for the zombie apocalypse, whatever works for you. But before any of that happens, will you please tell our listeners where they can find you and what you're working on next and how they can get in touch? And more importantly, where can they get your book?
So, if you want to, I have an author page on Facebook. It's just David Arndt Author. So you can go there, and I post stuff. I use it just to kind of lay out thoughts, the things that I've been thinking about recently. I just post it out there so you can see thinking as it actually happens, and photographs and things that are going on in my life. So David Arndt Author on Facebook. I think that this Pope Leo said in his recent encyclical, truth is not a territory to be defended. It's not a commodity to be sold. It's a good to be shared. And I really believe that. So both my books I've made open access so that anyone in the world with an internet connection can read the book for free. So the first book on Hannah Arendt is on the Cambridge University Press website. Type in David Arendt on the Political, and there's an open access version. You can read it for free. And if you go to the Bloomsbury website, write in David Arndt, Philosophy of Writing, there's an open access version. You can read the book for free. I don't think that whatever truth is in my book, I don't think should only be available to people who can afford to pay for it. I think that my education was subsidized by the taxpayers of California. I feel like it would be wrong for me just to try to make money off of that. So if you want to buy my book, don't let me stop you. But if you want to read it for free, there's an open access version on the Bloomsbury website.
I think that's fantastic. And I love the way that you're thinking about giving back like that and having open knowledge. That's great. All right. Well, Tim, do you have anything else before I wrap up? By the way, I wrote a whole new wrap up.
I do have one thing.
You do have one thing?
I found the card I was looking for. It's Star Wars.
No, wait, that's not the card you're looking for.
Wait. Listen. Yeah. Star Wars, the story of an orphan boy who becomes radicalized after a military strike kills his family. He's indoctrinated into an ancient religion, joins a band of rebel insurgents, and carries out a terrorist attack, killing 300,000 people.
On a large structure.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap up this show, and you'll be proud of me, Tim. I have the wrap up down now. I rewrote it 55 times, I think. Are you ready? All right, here we go. Well, folks, that wraps up another episode of Roundabout Creative Chaos. You can find us on the web at roundaboutcreativechaos.com. You can also find us on roundaboutchaos.com. See that, Tim? I got tired of typing all that out.
You messed up already.
I did. I bought a new domain because I needed it shorter. Anyway, we're also on Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and X. You can find us at Roundabout Chaos, where all the cool kids are hanging out. If you have feedback, guest requests, or insights into when the zombie apocalypse might finally kick off, maybe we should go find David's daughter. We can all survive. I don't know. But let us know by sending an email to interviews@roundaboutcreativechaos.com. And we'll see you in the after show.
If any zombies happen to get into your house, go for the brains. We insist. Do not leave your house. Thank you very much for your cooperation.
I just want to start a flame.
I will never get through it without injecting stuff that doesn't need to be there. I can't help myself.
You can edit it, though. You have the power.
Yeah, but where's the fun in that? David, I wanted to ask you, and this is just a random question that came up when you mentioned Star Trek. Oh my gosh, Star Wars.
The other
Star
one.
Wars, the other one.
The other Star Trek, yeah.
You started to say something about storytelling, why it makes a good story, and then you stopped yourself.
It's because, as I said before, I have a twin brother, Michael Arndt. He's a screenwriter. He wrote the script for a film called Little Miss Sunshine, which
Great film.
won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay in 2006. He also wrote Toy Story 3, and he was hired to write Star Wars Episode 7, and wrote part of it until he was fired from the job and replaced by Lawrence Kasdan. But he was, it's an interesting story. If he put together, while he was at Pixar, he put together a speech which he turned into a video about storytelling, and especially about endings. It's called Endings: The Good, the Bad, and the Insanely Great. And he gave 3 examples of films with good endings: Little Miss Sunshine, The Graduate by Mike Nichols, and Star Wars: A New Hope. And so he has, I am not a master storyteller, but my brother is, and he has a YouTube channel. People might be interested in this. If you go to YouTube and type in Michael Arndt Endings, his videos will come up, and they are a master class in screenwriting, talking about those 3 films, also talking about Toy Story 3, and he's coming out with a new video. It's in production right now on first acts, how to write a really good first act. So I'm a philosopher. I'm not a great storyteller, but he is a master storyteller, and he's just giving away his thinking on free videos on YouTube. So if anyone cares about storytelling, first of all, buy my book, because that's important. You'll understand why you should tell stories. But then if you want to understand the mechanics of how storytelling can be a way of thinking, especially character arc stories, then he is a master craftsman, and he lays out his craftsmanship in his YouTube videos.
I'm definitely interested in checking that out. And he's your twin?
He's my identical twin brother.
Oh, I was going to say, but you're the better looking one, right?
Let's just keep that between you and me. Okay?
Yeah.
Oh, so you were mentioning in your book, I think, about the 4 types of thought.
Yeah.
And how they map to the 4, I can't remember it now, 4 different types of writing.
Yep.
Would you mind going into that a little bit and how you came to that conclusion?
Yeah. So I think that the way that writing is taught in college courses now, in composition courses, it's focused on demonstrative thought. So you come with a thesis, and you have to present evidence to support that thesis. And what you're trying to do is you come with a thesis, you try to demonstrate it. And I think demonstrative thought has been privileged in Western thinking since Aristotle, since Plato and Aristotle. But I think that when we talk about evidence is never self-evident. Evidence always has to be interpreted. In order just to see something as something, there has to be some sort of interpretation. So the demonstrative thinking is always dependent on interpretive thinking, hermeneutic thinking. This is, so Heidegger and Gadamer and Charles Taylor, Paul Ricoeur have all tried to bring out how hermeneutics is not just one area of thinking, in addition to demonstrative thinking, that it's a level of thinking that precedes and makes possible demonstrative thinking. And then if we're trying to talk about conflicts of interpretation, like how to, if 2 people have different interpretations of a text, right? How to understand those differences. I think we understand those differences in terms of dialogue, right? Each partner in a dialogue has a different perspective, and they're approaching the same thing but from a different angle. And for them to talk intelligently about differences of interpretation, you just need to think dialogically. This, even in Galileo, right? Galileo says there's the old science and the new science, and they interpret the same evidence in different ways, and therefore Galileo's book is a dialogue on the two world systems, right? So that dialogical thinking is even below interpretive thinking. It's something that allows us to contest and refine interpretations. But then, if you're talking about moving from one perspective to another, from one point in a dialogue to another, dialogues have to unfold in time, right? There has to be some sort of back and forth between two people that's trying to move in some direction. So I think dialogical thinking is ultimately based in narrative, right? In order to understand a dialogue, you need to tell a story. So I really think that narrative is just the most natural form of human self-understanding. And that when we tell stories, even the stories that come to us in our dreams, right? Stories are ways of thinking about how we live in the world and what matters. So when novelists, or a screenwriter, a story comes to them and they become obsessed with it and they live with the characters and they try to understand the logic of the story, it's a way for people to work out their sense of what's true and what really matters. Just in a simple character arc story, right? Character begins, you have an inciting incident, you have a first act break, there's a midpoint reversal, there's a second act break, there's a climax, there's a denouement. That structure is just trying to say the ethos of the character, the way the character is at the beginning is not as good as the way they are in the end, right? They've gone through something that gives them a deeper, clearer, more just, more poetic view of the world, right? And so stories are a way for us to take our readers along with that journey and try to get from the perspective of the character at the beginning towards the perspective of them at the end. So I think storytelling, if you're trying to tell stories on a very high level, you have to understand. This is what my book begins with, a quote by Toni Morrison. And Toni Morrison says, "I couldn't have lived in the world if I didn't have writing, because writing for me is a way of thinking." And I think that Toni Morrison knew what she was talking about. So she wasn't talking about thinking in theoretical or abstract or conceptual terms. She was talking about thinking in narrative. And so I think that if you want to tell a good story, you need to understand that there's an ethical dimension to storytelling and that there's a logic to telling stories in a way that will lead your readers vicariously from one perspective, from a limited, shallow perspective to a broader perspective.
Would you say that maps to the hero's journey?
Yeah, to the hero's journey. And I think we're all heroes of our own lives, right? Because we live in time, so we're always moving, we're always projecting ourselves forward into the future. But the good, right? Pleasure, utility, beauty, these things exert a force attraction on us, right? We're never just moving forward. We're always trying to move up towards a better life. So our lives have the structure of a narrative, like a narrative quest, right? Where we're moving forward in order to try to move up, always, I think. And so narrative is just the most natural way that we can understand human life. If I may say something, if I may say, I usually think about character arc stories. That's what I talk in my book. Something that I don't mention in my book is I call a vindication story. We'll put it that way, which is a character stays completely the same throughout the whole story. And events happen to him that test his ethos, but he ends up being vindicated in the end. So the book of Job is the classic example, right? Job doesn't change really that much throughout the story. He maintains his righteousness. But I also think like The Big Lebowski is a good example of that, because the dude begins the story and then the dude's whole way of being in the world is mocked and ridiculed by the Big Lebowski. And everything that happens seems to call into question his way of being, but no, the dude abides. He never loses his cool. And precisely because he's mellow and not competitive, he's the only one in the film that's kind of a kind and decent person, right? When the Big Lebowski falls out of his wheelchair, the dude is like, let's help this guy back up into his wheelchair. So the dude doesn't change at all throughout the story, right? But what happens is his way of being in the world is mocked, ridiculed, belittled, tested, and yet he emerges not quite triumphant in the end, but he emerges having been vindicated.
Yeah, well, that's just your opinion, man.
Good. That was good. David, you say that you're not a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
You do say you are a philosopher, though, correct?
Yeah, I try to be.
I think they are, in a sense, one and the same. I think that to be a good philosopher, you need to be a good storyteller and you need to understand good storytelling. So I think you should stop saying that. I think you are a good storyteller. That's just my 2 cents. I'm just
Get
saying.
this guy an Oscar.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. I really admire Marcel Proust, and all 7 volumes of In Search of Lost Time is it's the story of how he tried to live a happy life by friendship, by travel, by romantic love, but in the end he realizes that the real path to happiness is artistic creation as embodied in the novel In Search of Lost Time. So you see how his experiences, which he narrates throughout the story, lead him to become an artist in the end, right? No one has ever really done that for philosophy, I think. No one has ever written a story of Augustine to some extent in Confessions, and Tolstoy to some extent in his Confession, but no one at a very high literary level, the level of Proust, no philosopher has written the story of his life that shows how his thinking grew out of his own experience and led to his mature philosophy. But it's something that philosophers should try to do, I think. Narrative philosophy. It's a huge unexplored possibility in philosophy, I think.
Well, it's getting kind of late. I don't want to keep you until the end of time, although I certainly could. As I said, I had a million questions. I still have a million questions, but I think a lot of them will be...
That's the point of philosophy, I
That
think.
is, isn't it? You ask a question and 5 more come up after you get the answer. Is it an answer at all? So, I don't know. We'll have to think about that one. But I do appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. I had a blast. Is there anything else you want to tell our listeners before we officially wrap up?
Nope. It was just totally my pleasure. I was dreading an interview, but it wasn't really an interview. It was a conversation. Completely delightful.
Oh, well, glad to hear that. Yeah, we're not big on interviews. We do prefer conversation around here. Get to know you, hang out, chat.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope our listeners enjoy it. I mean, they seem to. They keep coming back. So, yay, keep doing that. Do more of that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you for coming.
That's it for this episode of Roundabout Creative Chaos. Thanks for sticking around to the end. That's how we know you're one of the good ones. When you're ready for more, come find us at roundaboutcreativechaos.com. And hey, if you enjoyed the show, tell somebody. Leave a review, follow us on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, and point a friend in our direction. It's the best thing you can do for us and for them. Well, short of sending snacks, anyway. So, see you next time, and remember, the zombies are still out there, so stay sharp, keep your brains intact, and whatever you do, don't forget rule number 1, cardio.